Hey there, this is Franklin, and you're listening to Who Asked Us? Deep thoughts, lighthearted conversations. Here, you'll listen along as we discuss our way through the Bible with a growing, rotating panel of guests, none of which claim to be experts on any of this. We hope you get just as much out of these conversations as we did having them. Thanks for listening. We'll use this to segue in because I think it'll be a fun one to fade out of. Solar panels. You know those guys that walk around, they like knock on your door and they're like, I'd love to talk to you about solar today or whatever. So I'll talk to anyone who comes to my door. They want to talk to me about saving money. I'm not going to buy anything from you if I don't want to. Like, no, I'm.
You're one of those.
Oh, I'll invite you in. Like, please, take your shoes off. Like, have a cup of coffee.
My dad talks to spam callers. I feel like it's giving that.
Yeah, so do I. Everyone deserves respect. We are all created in God's image.
I mean, I'm not saying that's not the case, but
the guy comes and he's like, "Can I sit down with you and talk about solar panels?" I was like, "Yeah, I might not buy, but like, if it looks like it'll save me money, let's talk." Like, you know, I have plenty of time, so we sit down in my backyard, and he's going over stuff, and he's talking about it's going to save you money, and you'll pay less paying off the solar panels than you do for power. So in essence, your bill would be less until it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, "Can you grab me one of your bills?" I said, "Sure." So I go in and I get an electric bill and I come back out and he looks at it. And this is the salesman. His job is to sell me solar panels, right? And he looks at this bill and he goes, $68 a month? He was like, "It's the middle of the summer." He was like, "Are you Amish?" And I went, "Oh, is that good?" And he went, "This is the lowest energy bill I've ever seen."
I love it.
He's like, "Don't you run the ACs?" And I said, "No." And he turned and looked at my, at the time, pregnant wife and went, You don't turn the ACs on for her?" And I went, "No." And he went, "Listen, man, I can't save you any money." He was like, "You don't need solar panels."
Oh my God.
Pleasure doing business with you, dude.
I know, that's crazy. But you have to like commend him on his like honesty there.
I think I should be commended because I won. I beat the solar guy.
Franklin, why didn't you let your wife have AC though?
Because it's expensive.
Bro.
How much does it cost?
I don't know. I didn't do it. I would never know.
So you don't have like
the air conditioner. It costs
How do you know
more,
it's expensive?
Because if you turn on the air conditioner, it costs more money.
But then if you got the
off.
solar panels, you would have had the opportunity to have
but I would
AC
have to
without
pay
it.
more money.
No, solar panels
It's
is
an
also a
investment.
little bit of it's an investment that you get
It's
your
an
return on
investment.
in like how many years? You might as well, if you want an investment, go in the stock market. You don't need the solar panel for it.
I feel the same way about houses,
by
by the way, as you Kenneth, where it's like your house is probably not an investment, you know. But
It's not.
No, you don't treat your house
It
as
is not an investment. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Thank you, Ken. It's a
There-
good
you're
book.
right.
It is.
I've read that book as well.
What was it? Assets and liabilities,
Liabilities.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
house is a liability. Which I hate when he's like, "A poor dad says this," and I'm like, "That's what my dad says."
Wait, what is this? What is this book?
It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Oh, go ahead, Kenneth. You know
It's a
better
book
than me.
called Rich Dad Poor Dad by a man named Robert Kiyosaki. I think it's K.
Okay.
And it's a very, very important book because it's like the basics of financial knowledge.
Oh,
Then he's just explaining like all the colloquial knowledge of like wealth and everything is mostly wrong. And if you want to be wealthy, you gotta change your mindset and mind state on how like money works and how everything works. And then you realize it's not really hard to be wealthy. You just have to think about money differently.
Maybe I'll give it a read.
Oh, you definitely should.
I have no
that
money.
to-
It's one. It is like
I would recommend it to everyone.
he basically looks at it as like, it's rich. He has a rich mindset. A dad with a rich mindset, which is his friend's dad, and a dad with a poor mindset, which would be his dad. And like, it really is just the mindset about money. But it's interesting how much the poor dad mindset is really just the common mindset about all of it. And so it's
Oh, really?
yeah. I mean, he looks at it as like, your money should work for you, not you make money to buy something that if you need to sell it, that's where you get your money from. He's like, that's a liability because what if it doesn't gain value or whatever, you know?
Right, the cost to maintain that asset, or not asset, the cost to maintain your house, the taxes you pay on it every year. Like, these are not things that asset would do for you. It is losing you money. If you sell it, it might make money, but it's kind of
also you're not looking to sell your house, you're probably trying to buy a house to have it, you know? But yeah, so it's a good one. But all of those things couldn't have value if the good Lord didn't put us here. So let's jump in.
Nice
That was
It was good, right?
That was okay.
That was good.
Yeah.
I can't wait. All the comments on this one are going to be like, "Wow, what a beautiful segue! I'm so inspired. I didn't even listen to the rest.
No one's gonna say that.
I stopped listening here. Please continue to listen
Absolutely.
all the way to the end. Yeah, so let's jump in. Let's jump into some Genesis 2.
Love it.
Yeah. I'm just gonna throw this out there because I feel like this is where Genesis 1 left off. Image and likeness. We're talking about creation of man, and when I say creation of man, I mean mankind, not males specifically.
Love the clarification.
2025. Yeah, so can I just like straight up ask, image and likeness? We talked about this a little bit, but especially now that James is in the mix, maybe we could talk about it a little bit again about kind of where we are on that. Or actually, let me start with this. James, what do you take from that? What's your like surface thoughts?
That's interesting. Yeah, surface level, I still think of it as the creation story. Like, so if just talking about Genesis chapter 2, I don't know if you want to jump right into that part of it. So creation story, given dominion over all the animals, and then, woman's created from Adam's rib, right? So I guess the two things that stick out to me the most, and not exactly answering your question, I'm kind of pivoting a little bit, but the two things that stick out to me the most are God breathing life into the nostrils of Adam. That is like such like a vivid image, and I kind of love it because it's also like probably where we get the idea of like the soul from. And then the other part is shaping Adam out of clay, and that whole idea of like made in God's image and likeness, right? And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just very poetic and very thought provoking. But beyond that, yeah, I don't want to get too deep into it. I don't want to be the first one to kind of like get too deep into it. But I find it very poetic ultimately, and I don't know, just very nice.
I mean, we talked about that last episode too, about the idea of what's it called, like poetry versus fact. And like I totally agree with you, but I think the idea of like, okay, if this is poetry, like the words are still crafted in a meaningful way. So like in this poem, what would you, or anybody can answer this, since you refuse to answer my question, what do we mean by image and likeness? You know what I mean? When we are created in God's image and likeness, like, and I think one of the things we talked about, was like, do we look like God? Is it literally image? That's the word that I struggle with more. Is like, what does it mean by image?
Yeah.
Likeness, I kind of get.
Oh,
yeah.
that's interesting.
I mean, we kind of got into this before. I'm a proponent of thinking when we say we're made in the image of God, it is some sort of a physical image of God. And when I'm saying that, I'm talking about God as in Jesus and not God as in the Father, because the word tells us that no one has seen what God the Father looks like, and we are not even able to like comprehend. We're not even able to physically like do that. And so I do think that like Jesus, like, and also this falls into the concept of time, right? Like, which came first, us or Jesus? Because like humans in like Jesus's worldly life timeline came first, and then Jesus came afterwards. But I also kind of mentioned that I think that in Genesis, when Adam and Eve is with God, that's God in Jesus form. Because again, the word tells us that no one can really look at God the Father. And so I lean towards that. I also agree with the likeness thing, that we're made in God's image and likeness for the fact that we have his characteristics, and we have like his strengths, and we have echoes of who he is and who we are. So those are kind of where my thoughts are with starting out this conversation.
Can I add one? Can I yes and you, Natasha?
Sure. I love this. This is the second time we've used this.
So when you were saying that, like not being able to comprehend like the God the Father's form, that's very interesting. And what just brought to mind was the transfiguration on the mountain with when James, Peter, and John like walked up the mountain with Jesus, and he transformed or transfigured, I don't know. And then and then Elijah and Moses came down. Or no, was it Elijah and Moses? It was Elijah and was it Moses?
I think Moses, yeah.
I think it was Moses.
And yeah, so I like that's I never thought of it in that context where it's like, I guess that would be, so Jesus obviously being like showing his human form into, I guess, like a more divine form. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's very interesting. So I've never thought of like God shaping us in his image. I right, his image and likeness. So I guess like in a sense are you saying we're shaped the way we are because Jesus is shaped the way he is?
Yeah, like it's kind of a like which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, because there again, the concept of time to God, applying it to God is kind of finicky. But yes, in essence, that is
That's
what I'm saying.
I would say no, because I don't think that the image of God refers to anything physical. Just because God is not physical, God is spirit and must be worshipped in spirit and truth. But also, like Jesus himself is the, like in Colossians, it says he is the image of the invisible God, right? Firstborn of all creation, which means that just the fact that he has a body is just a creative thing. It's a representation, and it's not how he looks. It really isn't how he looks. It's not the fact
his
that he
true
has
form.
It doesn't matter if he has all of his limbs. If you're born without limbs for some reason, some tragedy, you're born looking one way or the other.
Sure,
that literally has nothing to do with God. The image of God, I think, is right there in the text about the role and what you represent within the world. Because right after he creates man, male and female, he says, have dominion over everything. Rule over everything. Everything in the sky, everything on the sea, everything in the land. And the only thing that even can have that type of authority or power is something that represents God in the world. So instead of God saying, I have dominion over everything, he creates these little things and says, you guys are my little representations. You're my little, like, there's a reason why you don't have idols, right? Because you as a human, as a person, are supposed to represent God.
I like the
There's
word
nothing
represent.
above you around. And I think that's what image really is.
Yeah.
It's an image bearer. You're representing.
Yeah, we're taking image so literally and like, what does it look like? Whereas represent is like, it doesn't need to, like, a lot of letters are symbols, right? And those letters don't look like what the sound sounds like, but they are images, they are representations. So that makes a lot more sense. Like it is he made us as representations of himself, which is like divine with a lowercase d. I always go back to, and I really like this, like the Greeks always said that it's like we had these divine gifts, and like the big one was like rationale, right? But like looking at it like that is like we are. I don't want to say we are divine, but like we are obviously related to that in a way that's different than like the other beasts and creatures of the earth, right? Like they don't have that, and we do, and that's why, that I guess would be how do we represent God, but they don't, and I guess that's how that would be. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I think I am a proponent of both. Like ultimately, like that there is maybe some sort of a truth to. I agree fully with what you're saying. I do think that there's maybe a component of truth with like our physical image too, but also I'm like, I don't know. Ultimately, if it matters,
I really don't think about the physical image just because there's nowhere else in the Bible where that's even kind of referenced.
Well, yeah, I would say that the physical image probably matters. What if we are talking about like the fact that Jesus came here looking like us, like that? I think matters. Yeah, because.
But he came here looking like us for our sake, not
that's
for God's
exactly what I was going to say.
Yes.
It allowed him to carry out what he needed to carry out, right? Like we wouldn't have been able to receive him if he came down here as, a floating land octopus instead. Like, obviously him being Jesus wouldn't have been received properly. So I do think that physical image does matter, and I see like why you come there, Natasha, but I guess that's more what it is like, I guess the image doesn't matter, but the idea of representation
matters.
Yeah, like
all of this makes me so curious as to like what everything's gonna look like when we die and go to heaven. Or
that's a good question.
Are we all gonna be like human form? Is there gonna be some other form? Yeah, no, but like that's a whole other.
But that's
topic.
A good question because like and I just to like allude to it. I don't think we have to dive deep into it, but like when we talk about our image and the way we were initially, like very literally, we're talking about our flesh, right? And like, I feel like a big thing in Christianity is like the battle between the flesh and the spirit, right?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And so like the flesh, not that I don't want to say it's evil or anything, it is, you know, it just is what it is. But like from what I understand is like when you die is you leave the flesh behind and the spirit is now unencumbered by it, right? You're uninhibited by the flesh anymore. So like it's my understanding that like this husk here, it's like you just leave it behind and we probably won't look the way we look, you know. However, I do think like when you go like, you know, whether or not somebody, your loved ones and friends look this as they did on this plane of existence, like, you know, don't think it matters. But that's why like that goes back to like, I guess the way that we look probably doesn't matter, you know.
The way that we look doesn't matter, but our bodies do. And I think because our bodies are physical, our bodies are what makes us a representation of God in the physical world. So that's why when we do, like when Jesus was resurrected, he was resurrected as himself. His body came back. And it's extremely important to remember that because that's who we are as humans. We're not just spiritual things. And heaven is not something that is the end goal, right? Because in the end, everything gets resurrected. There's a new heaven and a new earth. Just meaning that, like, we're not floating spirits or souls. Like, that's literally incomplete as a human.
Oh, I thought the opposite. What?
Yeah, no, that's not true.
What makes you
the
think
resurrection
that
is
for us?
extremely important, right? Without the resurrection, there is no hope for us, right? Like,
But like, let me ask you a question. So, like, Jesus was taken up, you know, body and soul, right? That's what it says at that point. Which I haven't read that part. I've only heard that part in church. So it's like, okay, so for him, yes, he took his flesh up with him, but like it seems like we don't, and that, you know, if our souls, you know, hopefully if we earn it, go to heaven and are saved, like why does that make us incomplete there? Like I understand that here we are both body and soul, which is a great jazz standard, but why is that necessary for us to be complete up there?
I mean, I think this is going to get us pretty off topic, but in terms of what it means to be human, in terms of Genesis and that, I think the concept of going to heaven is kind of skewed. And I don't really think, I don't think that's what Christianity is about.
Yeah, I feel like the incompleteness maybe comes in, and Kenneth, I feel like that's something that we lose like sight of often, that like I think a lot of Christians, we focus on getting to heaven, but the focus is like heaven in our brains, we conceptualize it as a place that we're getting to. But it's like spending eternity with God and what that looks like, because there is a second coming. Like heaven is not the full stop of our story. There is a second coming. There is a resurrection. And maybe that's what Kenneth is getting at. Like our bodies are important, but I wonder what all of that looks like.
Yeah, I think part of it is, and maybe this is a little a non-Catholic view, right? But I don't.
So wrong. Just kidding.
But heaven isn't a place we are going to. It's a place that we're bringing here, right?
So I understand
Ultimately,
that. Yes,
yes.
for the ultimate. But I feel like, well,
not just ultimate, like in practice.
No, but I feel like right now, from my understanding, because it isn't here, it is.
Well, what does Jesus say about heaven, right? He said the kingdom of heaven is.
That's why I'm here, bud.
That's a great question. He says the kingdom of heaven is what?
I don't know.
You know, it says it's here and not yet.
Oh, okay.
Kingdom of heaven is coming. It's not a place you go to. It's a place that you create.
And I don't think we talked about it before, but I remember in my notes I had something. Oh no, it was for this. It was for this. It was for this one. We'll come across it. But like, oh, actually no. Like, so even in this chapter, it talks like about the 4 rivers, right, that are coming through the Garden of Eden, and how like 2 of them are rivers that we know about in Mesopotamia, right, like the Tigris and the Euphrates. But the other 2 rivers, and we could look up their names if we want to, are not. And like, there's these. I even had some other things where I was like, it feels like even the Garden of Eden itself, right, where there are only fruit-bearing trees and all this good stuff and everything. That feels like it's heaven on earth as one. And then it feels like what original sin, which I know that's not in this chapter, but like we'll get to, is like, okay, now they're separate. And now you have to go through the hell that is earth, let's say, to get back into that heaven. And then eventually they will come back together, you know? Because it's interesting. I've also heard people talk about heaven as like, yes, it is a separate place that will eventually be here, but that separate place, if we want to get very fancy with it, is like another dimension that is overlaid onto our dimension, which is why when somebody passes and they say they're still with you, like, yeah, they're with you.
In a sense, I would say that I don't think heaven is a physical place. I think physical things are for the physical world.
I agree. I don't think it's a physical place, but I don't think it's, I know this doesn't really make sense, but like, it's obviously not here where we are right now. Maybe it's here in this space, which I know is a physical word, you know, but like, that's why I like to use the word like overlaid. It's almost like a,
another,
but it is like that's
like the fourth dimension or whatever.
Bringing it here, right? It is coming here. That's the whole point. Like,
but I think
in a
like
sense,
when it's here,
in a dimensional sense, it's
like that. Whereas like we'd have to cross that dimension right now, so to speak. I think when the second coming happens and that we have that new heaven, new earth, it's going to be similar to the Garden of Eden where it's all one. Because I think it's interesting, like these 4 rivers, and now 2 are still here, and 2 we have no idea anything about them. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost like those 2 were the heaven rivers, and like I just see like this dichotomy.
Oh, like you're kind of like the 2 that are missing are like not here because they're in heaven.
It's almost like
I get
it's almost like heaven is. I don't want to use the word incomplete.
It's like split.
But like, kind of, because the end goal is that it will we'll get this new heaven and earth mix. Whereas right now they've been separated in this way, you know?
That's interesting. I've never really thought about it like that, to be honest.
That was just on this read, yeah.
Yeah, it's a interesting concept to like kind of pick apart at and ponder a little bit more because, again, not something that I've ever considered. In my brain, I was like, oh, there were 4 rivers. I don't know, 2 of them, stuff might have happened. They might not just exist on Earth anymore.
It's just the fact that 2 of them, though, were rivers that we've learned about in school. So I'm like, okay, so we know where that is. But like, it's interesting. And obviously things can change. But like, it was just so weird to see, I don't know, to see that and to see it was like a half and half thing.
I mean, it's strange, even though how it names the rivers, like the 2 rivers that I think are still here, the Tigris and the Euphrates.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you look at how the author talks about it, he's like, then the 3rd river was the Tigris, which is east of Assyria, and the 4th river is the Euphrates. Like,
they just mention it.
And I think
I noticed.
I think it's because at the time it was written, it's already saying things in the past. Like it says the name of the first is the Pishon. It is the one that flowed past tense around the land of Havilah.
Yeah.
Where there's gold.
Oh, I didn't.
And the name of the second
that.
is Gihon. It was the one that flowed past tense around the whole land of Cush.
Wow.
And then the other 2 rivers is saying like, oh, they're still here. There's a Tigris, it's right over there, and the Euphrates, which everyone should know.
Yeah, the other
so cool.
Definitely like the other 2 have more of a. I'm going to explain these to you because where the intended audience doesn't know about these 2.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. So I think that's kind of just what it's saying. Like,
well, and that's why, like, you know, it's interesting, so cool. You know, like Natasha, before you had said, like, we think it's a very Christian thing or maybe a Catholic thing or whatever, that like we're trying to get to heaven. And I've never actually felt that, you know what I mean? I've never felt like I do this so I can get that, you know, eternal reward. Like, and I almost feel like that's a seems like a bad intention. Like I'm doing this because it's right. And right, like morally right, not, you know, whatever people could argue if it's correct. But I do this because I feel like it's morally right, not because I'm like, oh, I really hope I get to go to paradise. That would be nice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do, you know, but it's not my main leading factor. And now that I'm like, when I think about this, it's like, okay, because if the real end goal is to allow God to bring everything together again, that seems like a more, this might sound arbitrary, but that sounds like a much more noble cause than like, I'm doing this so I can get my presents at the end, you know?
Can I ask just the flip side of that? Do you ever do something or not do something because you're that fear of going to hell, you know, comes to your mind?
No, like I don't do it. Don't get me wrong. I definitely fear hell in that, like, I hope that I'm doing well enough to not go there because it
Mhm.
sounds bad. It doesn't sound like a fun
C's
place.
get degrees, baby. You know what I'm saying? Like, might not be an A plus heaven, saint, but like if I'm a C student and I get through, like, hey.
But that's why, like, so I definitely fear going there, but I don't try to avoid wrong things. Because, like, even, like, there are people who do way more wrong than me. It's not about how much wrong do you do. It's about your intent.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do wrong things because I love God. And I
Yeah.
don't want to say it hurts him because I don't know if he could be hurt, but you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
I care about him and he loves
Yeah.
me and he's taking care of me and I owe him that. Like, he's my parent.
Yeah. I think that you're getting at a really good point. I feel like maybe I'll speak about myself, right? I grew up Christian, and I am of an Indian background, and there is a lot of fear-based speaking in Indian churches where it's like, if you don't do this, you won't go to heaven. If you don't do this, like, you'll get to heaven and God will be like, I don't know who you are. There's a lot of like heavy hitters when you're growing up in Indian church where they kind of thrust that
Sure.
like mentality upon you. And I think once you start building your relationship with God, you realize that even though all of that is true, like, that is true. I'm not going to not say that. It
I don't
says in
disagree
the
with it
Bible
either.
is true. Exactly. The focus, Franklin, is what you're getting at, which is I don't want to hurt God. I want to, like, I want to make him happy. Like,
Yeah.
I want to make him proud of me. Like, he loved me so much that I want to honor that love that he's given me so freely. And so there's a shift in our understanding of what the priority is. And I think there's space for both of those in our walk with God. There is space for the fear. Like, we should be in reverence to God, and we should be in reverence to his power and his authority over us. But the focus is not just that. It's also the relationship with him.
Which is interesting. And I'm always saying this, I know it's off topic, but I don't want to, like, get in the way of, like, just the genuine thoughts in this conversation. Like, I don't think we should limit it, for the sake of being, like, really authentic. But, like, because you mentioned fear of God, and, like, that was something that I didn't really understand, and, like, personally, obviously our family suffered, like, a death recently that was pretty hard. And, like, that was the first time I realized, like, oh, anything can happen at any time. And I do fear God. You know what I mean? And I thought that was just so interesting because, like I said, like, I wasn't doing, I felt like my main reason for doing these things wasn't to go to heaven or to avoid hell, because I was like, God loves me. Like, all the teachings I've ever had is he's so forgiving, as long as you're like, just be truly sorry and all these things. And, like, this is the first time where I was like, oh my God, but he's still going to do it. I guess now that I'm saying it out loud, I don't fear him like he's going to be mean to me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
like a good
that.
parent, it's like, hey, I'm so sorry this is going to hurt you, but I'm not going to not do it because it's going to hurt you. It has to happen for whatever
Something
reason.
I had to learn is that when we're talking about the fear of God, and it's repeatedly mentioned in the Bible, it's not like fear, like I am afraid of you. It's reverence. It's respect. It's like, you have commanded me things, and I am in reverence to those commands. And so that was a concept I struggled with a lot, especially with my upbringing, because like cause and effect, like, you have consequences. There's a lot of fear-based mentality with how I grew up, but I don't think that's how the Bible is kind. I don't think that's what the Bible is meaning
exactly.
When
And then when it
fear of
comes to
God.
fear too, like, it's if you look at how the Bible talks about those who don't fear God, it's people who just literally do whatever they want, however they want. They go and do wild and crazy things. Especially, like, if you're looking at, like, Proverbs, the people who don't fear God, the people who are like, let's go murder and kill this guy and beat him up. And
Proverbs,
those people who
don't be a fool.
They have no respect or reverence of anything greater or more greater than themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what it means that you don't have any fear of God. Like, you think your life is your own. That's kind of what it is. And, if you, and, it says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Like, the beginning of knowing what's going on is that, like, there's things greater than me. There's things bigger than me.
Yeah.
So
I don't get to determine my own things, et cetera, et cetera.
So can I ask? Can I ask you a question based on that description, which I really
No,
like?
you can't.
The more you ask, the
Let's
more
keep
I'm gonna
going.
tell
Like,
you,
why are you
no.
asking a question if you can
No,
ask
you
a
can't.
question?
All right.
James is just so polite.
Like, should I just say, like, that
He
was your
understands
one
there are
question
things
you
bigger than
asked?
him.
I fear the
He's
podcast
respectful.
host. That's what.
As
my
you
God.
should.
No, so if I jump, to the next a little bit ahead in Genesis, right? You talk the Adam and Eve eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? And I don't remember if it was who said it. I think it was Franklin. You said that the like you can't hurt God, right? Like if you were to not be a good person, right, or not be afraid of him, or whatever it may be, or not fear him, which I agree with. But from my Catholic upbringing, the detriment from sinning or committing a mortal sin is like you break your relationship with God, and so it's more of like it's like harming yourself almost rather than harming God. I mean, how could you? So
you're hurting him in that like he's sad to not have that relationship with his child. I mean, like if we're looking at God as like a parent and we're thinking about good parenting, then he is the best parenting, right? And like a good parent is not going to be happy when the relationship with their child is tarnished in that way. So like, you know what I mean when like I'm not going to hurt
that,
you like
from that analogy,
you, Lord, you know.
Right, and from that analogy, I would just that sounds almost like the prodigal son, right? Where it's just like when the son returns, no matter how poorly the decisions they've made have been, how poor they've been, you know, it's like he still welcomes them home, like no matter what.
And that
right,
goes even to, you know, what Kenneth was saying about like, you know, the people who are like going out and doing whatever they want. It's two things that, like, you know, you can come back from that, which is the grace of God, which is a beautiful thing. But on top of that, there are people who like are, if we were to quantify sin, are sinning more than me or less than me or whatever. And those people are not more or less, you know, in the eyes of God. That's not the thing that he's specifically measuring. You know what I mean? And I guess like, you know.
And what is God measuring?
Well, because was it one of these?
I think about this a lot. It's the contents of your heart. So I don't remember if this is an actual Bible quote or something.
No, it is. Yes,
where it's like you cannot know you cannot know the contents of somebody else's heart, like, you know, that's, and even your own heart, right? Like that's solely
we judge people on their actions,
right?
It was actually I don't know if you listen to Father Mike Schmitz at all. Which
I do not.
So he's got his own podcast, which people should listen to after they finish ours and go all the way to the end. But so he
look out, Father Mike. We're going to be sending tons of people your way.
Hopefully, no. But he was talking about that. It was about don't judge, right? And he was like, no, we do judge. Like judgments are made when you look at somebody you care about and say they are sinning, and I'm going to like maybe hopefully help them and dissuade them from doing that. Like you're making judgments. When it says like, you know, we shouldn't be judging, it's more like you're not judging if somebody is going to heaven or hell, right? Because we only know people based on the contents of their actions, right? And you know, we'll include words in that too. Whereas God is judging you based on your heart. And that's knowing you, like, even outside. So, for example, like, if somebody dies young, right? Like, God understands you in your entirety, not on the years that you spent on earth, you know? And that's just a deeper level of understanding than we can have. So, and I think that's obviously more important, because you could be some guy who's looks like you're sinning like crazy, and for whatever circumstances, maybe that's just where that's the best they can muster right now. And I pray that they could do better, you know, for their own sake. But it, you know, might not be the reflection of their heart.
So
you know?
that brings up two quick thoughts. Sorry if I'm cutting everybody else off, but I agree. And I think that I try to mentally, like a little mental exercise I do is when I'm choosing my words about if I'm like maybe upset about something somebody did, even like sitting in traffic, right? And somebody cuts you off and I'm like, oh, this person's a terrible person, right? I try to be like, instead of saying that the person is saying something about the person, I'm like, oh, this person's a terrible person. I'm trying not to use like, you know, profanity, but like I'll say like, oh, that was a mean thing to do.
You can say the fucking worst. It's okay. I'm not against it.
What I'll say is I'll say that action was bad. I won't say that person's bad. And like it's like a weird little mental switch that I try to keep in mind. So, you know, and like we've all probably heard people say like, oh, that person's a dick or that person's an asshole or whatever. But, you know, so it's like, but if I say like, oh, that was a dick thing to do, like I know it's like not much of a change, but mentally, but a little bit.
It's a good point because first of all, it's like you're being more specific in what you're trying to say. Like, so you're just communicating better, which is good, right? I think being clear is a good thing. But you're also like, that's a way to keep on the forefront of your thought. Like, I'm not judging you as a person. You know what I mean? But like, we can call each other out on when we don't live up to our potential, right? Like, you know, a person didn't have to do that.
I think something that maybe, Franklin, you were getting at earlier is that like you were referencing this father, I guess, that sorry, I'm not Catholic. So
Do not apologize for that.
yeah, I was just I was like, is it father? Is it priest?
Unanimous
I'm not sure.
gasp.
But yeah, like saying that we are called to judge people. I do think we're called to judge fellow Christians. Like that is a responsibility I think we have. And something that you were getting at, James, is I think when you phrase it, like I'm thinking as you were speaking, I was thinking back to like periods in my life where my friends have called me out on things. And I think them changing the rhetoric to like classifying what I did as something wrong versus I was wrong, like automatically calls me higher. And I think that's what the root of like the Bible telling us like we should be iron sharpens iron is that we're supposed to call each other higher. So like pretend I don't know, keep showing up late. Like my friends aren't going to be like, you are just a late person. They're like, hey, you keep doing this and you're better than this. Like you're supposed to be better than this. And I think there's just love in that switch of terminology to begin with. And I think sometimes judging comes off like there's a very negative connotation in it, but I don't think that's what it's meant for. Like it's not, and it's again, not meant for non-Christians. They don't live their life based off of the same rules. Like that's like saying I'm a vegetarian, you should be a vegetarian too. That's not what we're doing. But like people that are falling under the authority of Christ, I think we have the freedom to be like, hey, you're better than this. Like I know that you're better than this. And that's something we're all called to do as brothers and sisters.
You know, I know it feels like we were off topic, but I don't think we were, because that kind of brings it back to like, you know, in Genesis 2, obviously now we have man and woman, and God decides like, you know, let's see how we phrased it, about basically like you're alone and you shouldn't be. Where was that?
18, verse 18.
Is that 18? Oh, so fast, and how you found it. I'm so impressed.
He's prepared.
Just has it up.
He's kind and prepared.
So yeah, so then,
I was
then
late,
the Lord God
so.
said, what'd you say?
But I was late. So,
That's right.
but, yeah.
Well, now the listeners know. They didn't know that. Now they know that you are late. Yeah, so then the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. And so we could look into that and go, you know, it says, I will make him a helper, you know, fit for him. So we could look at that as like, I do think that brings up the dichotomy of man and woman, and we could talk about that. But I think that just also brings up that like, it's not good. You can't do this by yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think to kind of chime in slightly on what we were talking about before, but also bridge it into now, I don't think people's hearts, we can't judge people's hearts. God can. And it says that the heart is desperately wicked. That's what it says. That's what God says. Like, we're just bad. Right. And also like right after the flood, right? What does God say? He's like, oh, when he puts the rainbow in the sky, and the rainbow means God's promise. He says, I'm never going to curse the ground because of people. Why? Because the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. So God's like, I'm not going to destroy the world because of people, because people are just evil from the moment they're born, like from their youth. And people's hearts are desperately wicked. And then when it comes to like judging people, I mean, what is it? John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave to us his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. Why? Because it says this, for God did not send his son into the world to judge the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not judged, but whoever doesn't believe is judged already. Right? And I think that's kind of the thing. He's not judging based on your actions. He already assumes that you're bad.
Yeah.
He already assumes that you're evil. Right? But the judgment is that light has come into the world, but people love the darkness instead of the light. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light.
I do think I completely agree with what you're saying, Kenneth. I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And I think if our end goal is eternity with God, that is the truth, right? Like we don't need to do anything else other than take Jesus as our Lord and Savior and accept him as our Savior. And that is salvation, right? And I don't want this to like get into a whole salvation conversation, but I do think that there is this process of sanctification that we fall into after we receive our salvation. And I think that's what I'm getting at more when we're talking about like judging each other and calling each other to a higher standard. But the root of what you're saying is completely true. There is nothing else that we need to do other than like fall into the authority, fall under the authority of
that's
Christ.
what it is, right? So like when, you know, for all those who believe in him, like, okay, so what does believing in Jesus look like? Right? It's probably not saying I believe in him, but I'm going to do whatever I want. I mean, like, you know, I know he's a controversial figure, but Jordan Peterson talks about that whenever people ask him, like, what does he believe in? And he goes, I don't act like I believe. I try, but like, if I really believed, like, I would. He more is talking about fear of the Lord, right? He's like, then I would never do the wrong thing, because if I was really afraid of him like that, this all-knowing God. So, like, you know, listen, I think he avoids the question in a way that like he knows what people are asking. But he does refer to it as like, so like it's an action thing to believe, right? So I think when we're talking about like, okay, our hearts are wicked, and we could, I mean, like, we could still talk about the whole idea of like being judged by our heart, because that's listed somewhere else. I don't remember where. But I think that does bring into question, like, so our actions do matter, not in a quantity type of way, but like, are you acting in a way that, like, you could say you believe as much as you want, but do you act as if you believe? And we could talk about what that is probably another time, you know. But
I'm bringing this up not to get too much into a question on salvation, right? Because I think that'll be a cool feature episode.
Yeah.
But I bring this up to say that God kind of knows where we're at and how he created us. So when he creates mankind, and he starts off with man, and he says, well, it's not good that man is alone, and then creates them as a kind of dual part type of entity. We're not like fungus, which only has one thing. It's a male and female. He thinks it's a good that men and women are together as one mankind type of thing, which in our life, I think exposes a whole host of problems, right? The difference between men and women, and what's the word? The incohesion between men and women, and all the enmity between us. But it was actually for a good to solve a problem that if it was just men alone would be evident, right?
Sure.
Like, I think there is a thing there that's extremely important. So I think part of it, like, what does it mean to be human, is that having that kind of dual sexes type of thing is a really good, important benefit to humanity.
Can't live with them.
And I think it stems exactly, right? I think it stems from one of the facts that humans by themselves are not actually good. Like God himself has said, it's actually just not good.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting, and I know this is very like cliche, but like I like to see when these like universal truths kind of like pop up in other places, because I think it just affirms that, you know, everyone is kind of in touch with these things, right? Like, anyways, before rather than over explaining, so like that made me think of like, you know, the yin yang, right? And if one side is, you know, male and one side is female, right? Like it's almost like, yes, obviously there's balance, and like people are like both sides are like covering the weaknesses of the other with their strengths and such. But it's almost like not just weaknesses, but like the propensity for that evil, you know what I mean, is in different places. Like if you look at like the thin side of like the white side or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that would be like the evil side. It's not as fleshed out and like good, let's say, right? But that's filled in by the good of the other side, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like it just makes me realize like that dichotomy is such a supporting thing within those differences, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I share
Oh my
No.
God. Are you going to ask another question? Just say what
No,
you have.
guys,
Here's our
stop
next
being mean
subreddit.
to
It's going to be
James.
James asking.
I don't like
Can I-
this. Stop picking
Can
on
I say
him.
something?
I have this.
That'd be a good title.
I have this tangentially related theory, basically very similar to what, or based on what Franklin was just saying, that everything in society all different problems in society have to deal with scale. So if you have a group of, there's 4 of us, talking right now, a group of 4 people, that's actually going to look a lot different than a conversation between 2 people, right? And maybe and a lot different than a conversation of you just, you're having in your own head of a conversation of one. And now, so that like all those dynamics are different on a small scale. But then if you say, no, okay, now there's 50 people that are trying to have a conversation, right? Now you need some type of organized like mechanism for who gets to talk. Then you go that up to 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, the size of a country or something, right? Solutions look so different at different scales. And I think that fundamentally, so I don't know how I would like quantify this, but ultimately there's some mechanism of balance is like actually essential. So kind of delving into a little bit of a hot topic now, but this is not on our show notes, so I'm sorry. You guys have probably heard about how people are forming relationships with like large language model AI companions, and I think that from what I've heard about,
I like how Kenneth said that. Oh yeah, what a life! Yeah. that is a scorned
I'm
married
just
man
over
right
here
there.
just developing AIs so people can have their robot lives, I guess. I don't know.
And so I think that that's kind of like what happens, what can happen to some people when it's a conversation essentially of one, because there's a lot of these large language models are just kind of programmed to agree with you, and especially if you tend to have maybe like a bit more of like a self-aggrandizing behavior or narcissism or something, even if not a lot, but you just have a little, and we all have an ego to an extent. So it tends to kind of build on that. So I think that the balance between like, having gender roles, and I'm not saying they have to be like strict gender roles, just having 2 different things, right? Is like there's probably like a more fundamental psychological argument for it. I don't know what that would be, but and then going beyond that, like to larger scales of people, like, so it's, so obviously like, 2 people being, in a serious relationship versus society having, roughly 50% men and women, right? So I think there's something to that. On a more fundamental, like human condition, psychological level, that is like
I think
that
you're
I think
right.
is ultimately implanted, like, or is at least discussed in the Bible, in chapter 2, so of Genesis. So yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of like something I think about a lot. I'm going to work on it more. All right. Next time you have me on, I'm going to have some numbers. All right. I'm going to do some surveys.
You bring up an interesting point about the idea of like, a relationship with an AI model is a conversation of one, right? Because it is just agreeing with you. Whereas like, it says the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. So it's like, it is not good to be by yourself. Why is it not good to be by yourself? Like that should be the next question, right? And one of those things is you're never challenged, right? There's no opposite. We could talk about that on the big models that you're talking about, and the little models where it's just 2 people in a relationship. But like that challenge is good. I mean, that's what I love the most in my marriage is like when we push back, not in an argument, but push back against each other so that we could hopefully both be better. I mean, that's what we're doing now too. This is a little bit of a larger scale, and this isn't specific to gender, but we're here to challenge. We're not alone here, and we're not alone in our study and our faith. We're bringing other people in so that hopefully I'm bringing something that challenges one of you guys or one of our listeners in terms of thought, and vice versa. I'm here so that you guys could bring things to the table that I could not have thought of by myself, right? So I think you're totally right. That idea of like that conversation of one is the problem. Like we should not be alone for that, for all those reasons, whether it be supporting each other, whether it be challenging each other, whether it be holding, we could, because you can go into holding people back for that propensity towards evil, like Kenneth was saying, like, especially that actually would probably go more towards gender norms, because I would imagine just a surface thought is like, I think each gender has a different evil with, characteristic of evil, I should say, and I would say that like the other gender kind of balances them and like, restrains that, so to speak. So it's interesting.
There are like 2 different ways that I want this conversation to go, and not 2 different ways, 2 different paths, and I don't know which one. One, we can continue to talk more about actually there is male and female, right? Like so, God thinks it's important. Is it actually important? What's the relationship that we actually do have? What's the there's a whole thing there which I think is going to be
I
fun.
love that.
And there's also the aspect that kind of James brought up that I'm a little mad I didn't get to. I'm mad I didn't get to think about this in the outline. Or maybe I did. I didn't check the outline since I did it. But AI brings a whole different thing of, well, God created mankind in his image and likeness.
Mm-hmm.
And are we creating something ourselves in our own image and likeness when it comes to AI and talking to AI now and making relationships with the things that we created? One thing I found interesting is, in the story when it says God creates mankind, right? And he brings to man a whole bunch of different animals and things like that, just to see what mankind would name it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's God creating something. He's like, I want to see how this thing I created is going to interact with all these other different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, in the earlier day, like a few years ago when AI, ChatGPT was really starting getting famous or used by a lot of people, I found myself just using the AI and it's like, I wonder what's going to say if I give it this information or do that. Like, am I playing the role of a little creator with this intelligence that I'm creating and then seeing what it's going to do and how it's going to operate? So I think both of those things I think are important. You guys can take it either way, but really the role of men and women and like what women are like, what men are like, and what that's even meaning for humanity, right? And especially as humanity may be even going to a place where they're trying to transcend male, female altogether, right? And then the aspect of, are we also trying to transcend humanity altogether with AI? Yeah.
The first question, I'm sure we'll get to. The second question, maybe it's because it's like the latter question and it's more like in my brain. I do think, like, again, we're meant to echo characteristics of God. In the way that God is a creator, we are meant to be creative. And so I think that something like AI coming into the story in this day and age is on itself okay. I think we are meant to like push forward technology, medicine, everything. Like, I'm a huge proponent of advancements in every field. I think it's the how we're using it. And what ends up happening is I think this is a lot of broad statements. I feel like we as a society right now is dealing with a lot of things. We are dealing with loneliness. There's a huge loneliness epidemic. And I think that what ends up happening in the world is something is created for good and it becomes perverted. And that's the story that keeps happening over and over again ever since creation. Like, God created all of us for good and it ends up becoming perverted. Like, literally, we could apply that to any sort of invention that even us have created. And I think that's what's happening with AI. So on its own, AI is amazing. Like, there are so many uses for it. It's pushing like society forward, mankind forward, leaps and bounds. I feel like it is one of the recent inventions that has like changed the face of society. But like most good things, it is also being perverted. And that's a symptom of like mankind's issues. Like, that is not a symptom of what AI is on its own. It is like a huge outcry of what we're dealing with as human beings. So again, all of us, not all of us, most of us are lonely. And we are trying to find our own like worldly solutions to something like loneliness. And as a society, like as Christians, we will say that the answer to that is God. But people that don't fall into that, don't like observe that, is trying to make their own answers for it, which I think is AI.
I just want to acknowledge that that's the argument I have with my dad about the internet. I don't know if anybody else has had this argument where, my dad thinks, he's like, oh, people used to just be weird by themselves, and now they're weird and they found people on the internet. Now there's weird stuff on the internet and the internet's evil. And I'm like, please laugh into the mic so that people know that you guys are laughing. This is hysterical.
Oh my God.
I'm laughing.
It's so funny because like, and I would say to him, I'm like, yeah, but look at all the good the internet's done for the world. He's like, it should never exist. Look at all, it's terrible. It's just,
Yeah.
But he is correct in that, yes, it has enabled so much negativity. But I think like it's more towards what you were saying, Nat, like the idea that, everything that we create has the propensity for evil. We are a creation that has a propensity for evil. But we could also do many beautiful things, right? And I like that you're saying like these things tend to be perverted. And I think if we think about like, so we are created in the image and likeness of God. So if we create something, it is more removed, but still connected and created in the image of likeness and God, of God. So like that propensity for evil also kind of like trickles continuously, right? Which is why like, so I don't know. It's just, I think that's just an interesting thing to note where like, you know, as it's almost like every step away you get from God, I feel like the possibility of something evil coming out of it. Almost, you know what I mean?
And that's why
No
I
internet?
I could say something so wild.
No
but
internet?
I want to. No, I want to say it so wild because I want to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's
Go
why
ahead.
women are inferior to men. Because God made man, and then from man, God made a woman.
But
So what do you guys say to that?
well, but man didn't make woman. Like my argument was,
Ooh,
so God made man. And
what
then
a great
man
I'm
made
snapping
argument.
into the mic.
That was
Listen,
good. That
I'm
was a
not
good one.
saying that I'm an ally or anything, but if that's something you guys want to say, I mean, history more like
Do
herstory.
not make
You
me
know what I'm
tell your
saying?
wife.
That
What?
was
Okay.
a very good
James, I don't know your
counter.
wife yet.
No, but I mean-
I think you're married, but
And
I can
that's-
tell all of your wives.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
But
too. That
honestly,
was a
like,
good one.
because that's what it is. It's so
Mhm.
God created woman, yes, from
Mhm.
man's rib, and we could talk about what that means. I don't think he specifically, like, I do look at this as poetry, but yes, I get what you're saying. But man did not create woman, you know, like, so it's not removed in the way that I was kind of looking at that.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Good
do
answer.
not. I'm not
Good
arguing
answer.
That's
that
a great
women
answer.
are not inferior. I'm just
Okay,
arguing
all right.
that it's not via
That
the
was
Okay.
argument I just made.
I would just like to clarify for the people listening: women are not inferior.
No,
to men.
they're not.
They're not.
I don't think anyone on this panel believes that. Some people may,
Yes.
but I do.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Well, I know
anyone
you
does.
guys, but the general public.
Well,
don't.
Andrew Tate's coming
So
on
let's
next
just
week, so.
I love that. That would be a conversation. Interesting.
I don't know if I have the energy to even.
Maybe-
entertain
maybe
that
one
idea
day.
if this
Just to
thing pops up.
clarify too, I think that is part because remember we've read through Genesis 1 separate from Genesis 2. Genesis 2 seems more like a mytho-historical story, but Genesis 1 kind of sets the stage. And in Genesis 1, God says, "Let us make man in our own image," and He does, male and female, right? And that's it. It doesn't have any type of superiority levels, or it just says God's like, "Let's make man, meaning mankind, in our image, and I'll make man, male and female." And
Can I
that's
ask
it.
you a question then? And this is just like
What's
more
up?
of a thought exercise. But like we've talked in Genesis 1 about like, yes, okay, if this is poetry of some sort, or if this is an artistic language to get a point across, the language is still very specific in like the ordering and such. Do you think do you think there's any significance to the fact that woman specifically came? I know like you could say like man is mankind, but the 50% of mankind being woman came second. I'm curious if like like I said, for the record,
I mean, you could just view it so many different ways, right? You can view it as
Go ahead.
You can view it as, well, God creating mankind, starts off with male, right? And says that this isn't good. And then has to fix it.
So you think the order is arbitrary?
I don't know if
I don't think the order is arbitrary.
I don't think the order is arbitrary, but I just don't think it's relevant for the points that we're talking about at this moment.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I don't think the order is random. I think there's a reason why Adam was created first and Eve secondary. Not saying that women are secondary to men. That is not the point I'm trying to get
Natasha
across.
is on record an ally.
And so I think like this also, what I feel like needs to be grounded in is, and I kind of said this before, is that everything points to Jesus, right? Like Adam is the first Jesus, vice versa. You can say too, like Jesus is the second Adam. Like there is an importance there, right? Like because in actuality, like everything that Jesus accomplished was the original plan for Adam, to live a life that is sinless, that is with God, that is always constantly in God's presence, that is always in God's presence.
Yeah.
And because of the fall of man, because of sin, because of evil, that has all dissipated. And then we, get Jesus on earth after a while.
And I don't mean to, and I want you to keep going, but I do just want to like put in there like that idea of like heaven and earth being one, you know what I mean, was the original intention. And that like that's why that kind of makes sense to me, Yes,
exactly. And I think that is one point I wanted to make. The second point is, I don't know about everybody here or the general public, but I do believe in gender roles. I do believe in like a man being the head of the household, all of that stuff. And I think there is significance here in that too, with Adam being created first and Eve being created second. That is not me saying that Eve is less important or not as equally beneficial or doesn't have the same rights or anything like that.
Sure.
But I do think that there is unique strengths and weaknesses given to each gender, each sex, for God's ultimate plan to come into fruition. And both parts are equally needed.
Can I ask, because I agree, so if you look at, anything that requires multiple people to have individual jobs, right? Mm-hmm. They're all necessary and important for the thing to work, right? So like if you're on a team with somebody, like a baseball team, right? All the positions are important. You know what I mean? Like, because if you don't have somebody in that position, you now have an extreme gap that could be exploited, right? So I agree with you. I'm just curious, and I think it's more because the term like head of the household has a shock value of what that means that like can imply like the boss. So I'm curious, like what is the head of the household? What is that in your understanding?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is my interpretation. I would want to preface this with like my current understanding, and it's an area that I'm still like growing and learning in. I also, for the record, am not married, am not in a relationship. I think that's relevant to this conversation. But to seeing the couples around me, to like my past relationships, I think what it means to be the head of the household is to serve the household. So if we're doing the dichotomy between like a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, and Christ and the church, right? Christ is the head of the church, is the head of the household. Christ came to obviously die for our sins, but he serves the church. He is not like a leader standing at the front telling us every which way to go. He is the person that's standing at the back making sure everyone's moving forward. He is the one that's making sure no one's being left behind. And I think that is the rule of the head of the household, is to make sure that the unit of whether or not we're talking about Jesus with the church, we're talking about a husband with a family, like is to make sure that the unit is moving forward and progressing. And if we're applying like our walk with God, is to make sure that the unit is one, like has salvation, and two, is continuously being sanctified and moving forward with their walk with God. And so I think that is a very like religious aspect, but I also think it's in the worldly sense too. Like I think the head of the household is responsible to make sure everyone is like secure and safe and like taken care of, and like ultimately that and as I've gotten older, I'm like, man, being a man seems really hard. Like
but we don't birth babies. So that's the equal part.
Like, I mean, we just suck it up.
Like it seems like. Again, I have my parents are both married. I think they have a wonderful relationship. The things that my dad worries about is not the things that my mom worries about. They are both equally important. But my dad is focused on like moving us forward, and my mom is focused on like making sure we all are doing like okay, if that makes sense.
Well, it's almost like I'm sorry to interrupt, but like it's almost like, okay, you have somebody that's navigating where the ship is going and somebody making sure the ship can stay afloat. Like both are equally important. You know what I mean? And I understand that in society we can go, oh, but this is like we could put these like external values on what we think is more important, but like I think like that's just what we're putting on it. Both like if your household is not in order, then it can't move forward, right?
Exactly.
Which is interesting. And I think what's really interesting about what you're saying is the idea of like, we're like a microcosm, and this goes back to image and likeness, right? We're a microcosm of like how Jesus is with the church, right? And how God is to humanity, right? We're these smaller, obviously much more flawed versions of that, but still like these representations, if we wanted to use that word continuously. I am curious, why then is there not or maybe there is, maybe that's not, maybe that's Mary. Like, who is like that I'll use the word role model, I guess, for the woman's side of that thing. But I guess I kind of just answered, like, in my head, it would be Mary. She is like the mother of mothers, so to speak, you know?
Yeah, it's a very Catholic thing. So I don't know if
It is a very
Yeah,
Catholic
I
thing.
would say it's the church.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
I would
yeah.
say it's the church. The the bride and the bridegroom sort of scenario, like, is, I would say that women in that dichotomy fulfill the role of the church.
Okay.
And the dichotomy with Jesus. One other thing I just wanted to mention before we move on, is that I think, like, maybe sometimes the thing that I struggle with this too, is like, when we're saying head of the household, there is a level of like authority that is given to that statement. And I think that we don't have to delve very deep into this, but there's like authority and submission. And that's when we're talking about husband and wife, I think that's what a lot of women struggle with.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to point out is that while men have, in my personal opinion, as head of the household, have authority, there is this like huge asterisk, is that how I say that, at the end of that, where it's, you don't have the right to abuse that authority. And I don't think God calls you to fall under that.
No. I knew, but I like how it's,
Franklin was like, "Oh, I can't abuse."
But you know what I mean? Because I think that's where the tension is, right?
No,
like,
you're
from
right.
a lot of
There's a
women's
responsibility.
Yeah, there's a responsibility. Like, you're not meant to be, like, in the same way Christ isn't meant to be authoritative and authoritarian over the church. He has authority over the church, but like, we still have free will. Like, he's not like, this is everything you have to do.
And I think that's a really good point, because I think like that just shows like it's I don't know. I that just makes so much sense, because I think that that's what everyone's kind of afraid of when you mention like head of the household, is that abuse of it, right? And those I would say bad head of the households who like are authoritarian in their own homes, and you know, whereas they don't. It's like the image of a good leader, right? There's the good leader who's sitting on the chair and like telling the people to pull the big chair. You know, it's a very classic image. And then the opposite, where like they're in the crowd, just like helping organize everybody to do it, you know, so to speak. Like, that's a very, very big difference. And there's a level of respect for the other roles within that household. And there's a level of, you know, like I said, if they're going to have that power, if that's the word that we're going to use to quote Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, then they also have that responsibility. Like that, they cannot, they're not free of that responsibility to use it in a specific way.
People are always afraid of giving power to somebody, because we know how humans work, and humans can always abuse it. But at the same time, in the Bible, the same place that says, you know, with the submission and things like that, they also talk about like government authority, right? The same government authority that was persecuting them, you still have to give them respect, or respect is due, at least submit to it.
There, as you're saying this, like, maybe I'm really not good at referencing my Bible, but I do think that there's an area of the Bible where it's like, husbands, if you are not good to your wives, I will not hear your prayers.
Oh yeah, that's
which is kind of wild.
You admit that in the Catholic Church.
Oh, do you?
No, I'm
that's
just,
like
I'm just kidding.
crazy.
I haven't heard it, but I like
Oh,
No,
really?
yeah, like,
I need to like
your prayers are hindered because you don't take care of your wives, you know.
And I think it goes back to like the fact that, I mean, maybe we're going to touch upon this in later episodes, but like what our purpose is, and God kind of giving us like stewardship over the entire world, but like a family unit is in the same context, giving you stewardship over God's like most important creation. Like, you are given stewardship over other human beings, and if you're not going to do well with that, like, you are not going to, he's effectively being like, you're not going to have a relationship with me if you're not going to do well with what I've given you, which again is why I'm like, thank God I'm not a man, because that sounds so scary.
Yeah. There's something.
Go ahead, Cam. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like, I actually really like that point, the family unit point, which I think we're gonna get to in a second. I just want to make sure to tie it a little bit into what we're reading, though, is when God does make woman, right? He says, starts off, it's not good that man should be alone, right? So then what does God do? He creates woman. No, he doesn't actually. He doesn't do that next. Out of the ground, the Lord had formed every beast of the field and every bird of heaven, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Right after he says it's not good for man to be alone, he's like, okay, look at all
What
these
verse are we at?
animals.
Sorry.
We're at verse 18, chapter
Okay.
2, right? So God says it's not good for men to be alone, and then he shows man all these animals and stuff, right?
Mhm.
Then it says, but for Adam, there was not found a helper fit for him.
Mm.
So, therefore...
Because you guys needed us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the Lord
Wasn't enough.
caused a deep sleep on the man and took one of his ribs, closed it up, whatever, and then created the woman. And then the man says, this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called a woman because she was taken out of man.
And I really like that the man said that and not
Mhm.
God. Like,
Mhm.
that's amazing. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
And it's extremely important. So, well, I guess it'll be important in the future chapter too, but like, man is looking for someone to be a helper fit for him, right? And so God's like, look at all these creatures. I created like a whole bunch of stuff. You'll find something here, right?
You got like a horse.
And-
you got like
and-
a horse with a long neck. You got like a
Yeah,
horse with
you know,
stripes
like-
on it.
Yeah, you got
There's
so
like
many
5
cool
different
things,
types
you
of
know?
horses,
The
you know?
fact that you
maybe
guys
a
think go straight to
dinosaur if you
dog.
believe in a certain thing.
Man's
like,
best friend.
so- all these creatures, and no, none of them work. So
Yeah.
God actually has to go and take something that is of equal value,
Mm.
Oh,
something
okay.
literally of equal value. And that's
Mhm.
why it's at last bone of my bones,
bone,
flesh of
flesh of my
something that
flesh.
is
Yeah.
of me.
Yeah.
And that is what was given as the completion for what mankind is.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful because this like passage is again always taken so out of context depending on who you are,
Yeah.
and there is always a push for like women are weaker than women. But I think it's right there in the text, like you're saying. It's so like everything else that was lesser was not enough,
Mhm.
and like we kind of like I wish it was taught that way. Again, I have a lot of Indian church feelings, but like I wish that was taught that way as I was growing up, because it's literally right there that it's not enough, that something equal is the only thing that would satisfy that help like need that he had.
And actually, to go,
Exactly.
Natasha, to go off what you said earlier about, it's like to be the head of a household means to serve the household. Just an interesting title that the Catholic Pope is one of the titles for the Pope is the servant of the servants of God. And so he's like supposed to be, the vicar of Christ on earth, and but like his role is to be the servant, like the ultimate servant of the church, and help guide it.
Yeah.
And if like you can make an analogy probably to a family unit there, right, where it's like and there's probably been some bad popes, but like at least the goal of that is to be the servant and actually guide the whole unit, whether leading by example or whatever it may be. So I think that it's just like it's just very fast. It's very nice to hear, and I very much agree with you saying that. And then also now going through this and seeing like it's being of the same flesh, right? That's the only thing that like man and woman are equal in that sense, but the different roles are it's not that one is better than the other. It's that they're both equally important.
And that's so important
Yeah.
because it doesn't work otherwise. Like, Natasha, you were saying it's taken so often out of context, and it just simply doesn't work, and I think that's so very important because it's not even close if you don't take it in its full context.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find better words, but it literally does not work. That these are two equal parts. That the jobs have equal value despite the value that we are trying to place on it based in our context and history. That's not how it works. There are certain things that we are built to do to be able to not be alone. I keep going back to, right? So that we are not alone and that we can all have these strengths and weaknesses to lift each other up. And like you said, that like process of sanctification, right? I think that's so important because if you only take part of it, if you go, woman was made for man, which means woman is subservient to man, which means man is in charge. Like if you're the authoritarian in your house, you are alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't work
Yes.
anymore. You are now alone. And that is the thing that we said is not good. That's like,
Exactly.
it's just so interesting that like,
Actually,
I hope
I
people
point.
really,
like
That's
the
a
way you
great
just
point.
phrase that.
Yeah.
If you're the authoritarian,
You're
that
alone
means
in
you're
your
the only
house.
one who's doing this by yourself. You're alone.
Yeah.
And you just have
That's a
lesser
great
creatures
point.
around you.
Yeah.
So
Like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, on a team, yeah, you eventually need somebody to go, cool, so we all agree we're going to do this, you know, like,
Yeah.
whether, you know,
You need a team lead, but
yes, you know, but it doesn't mean that that person is more or less important. They couldn't do it without each other, so the value
Yeah.
becomes equal. I do think it's
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know if we're going to get to it, but it's just like, and I don't actually want to get to it now. I think it happens a lot in the Bible, but it's interesting that God went to the trouble to go, well, maybe you'll find a partner in all these animals. And I find it interesting
Yeah.
to go like, God, you know none of them are suitable. Like, are you making him go through the process so Adam can learn that?
Yeah.
Or why not just give him woman right off the back? Why are you making him
that's
look
what
at
I
the
was saying. It's
horses
going
on
to be
the horses
important,
before?
especially in the next chapter.
Yeah.
And we'll read on that because it's Adam actually who chose this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert for this really, really old
But
book.
yeah, for sure. It's God's so intentional with everything. Like,
That's what I'm
he's
finding
so intentional
in this
with everything.
poetry, especially, like, you know, the way that this is laid out, it's you can't dismiss it and go, it's poetry, I'm not going to take it at face value. There's still intention behind all of how this is written that that deserves attention, which is
I would like
for sure.
I would like to make a a media recommendation. And if there's anybody else that also has so last time I was on, I was recommending.
No, this would be a nice way to move towards wrapping it up. I think, like, yeah, definitely.
So there is a famous rapper, Hopsin. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him.
Hopsin? H-O-P?
Hopsin, yeah. He has a song called Ill Mind 7. And it actually wrestles with a lot of this thing about, like, you know, being a good person versus doing what you want to do. And fascinating song. Highly recommend to anybody. But just one caveat that I think is an important thing to keep in mind, because that song doesn't actually end on a very positive note. It's kind of like, I guess, spoilers for a song. It's kind of about him, like, really wrestling with his relationship with God and if he's gonna be able to maintain it, right? And so, but one thing to keep in mind, I think, is something we talked right in the beginning of the episode about, is the fact that if heaven is a physical other place, or if it's actually something that can be here on earth. And I think that is a much more profound way of thinking about heaven and thinking about religion, being like, okay, could we actually make heaven here on earth? And so this is something that I don't know enough about, but I always think of, like, the second coming of Jesus Christ. I think of that as, like, maybe that's just when we actually achieve heaven on earth, you know?
That's what I thought it is.
Like,
yeah.
it's not like him coming down to, like, destroy the earth or whatever. It's like, it's like
I do think it's this
able to
earth
get there.
ends, because Natasha said earlier, like, a new heaven and a new earth is what it's written, right? So I do think, no, this earth will end, but I guess in tandem, like, so will this current version of heaven, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but either way, my media
heaven and new earth. Yeah.
My media recommendation, Illmind 7. Love this conversation. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah,
love it.
This is a fun one. This is good.
No other media recommendations?
I don't have any other no, it was very obvious nobody else is gonna present a rap song to you.
Well,
I'm sure there's more some
I have a rap music song.
I need to recommend music.